Good morning and welcome to Let the Bible Speak. My name is Alex Meredith. I'm the minister for the Marquette Church of Christ. Really glad you're here with me this morning. I would like to start off by asking you a really tough question, and I want you to think critically about this, if you could. Is there a limit to God's mercy? Is there a limit to God's mercy? Before you jump and say something fast, really think about this. Is there some line that you can cross at some point where God says, that's enough, I'm done? Is there a point of no return? Does that really exist? Right? Is there a limit to God's mercy? On July 22nd, 1991, a man named Tracy Edwards was found running down the streets late at night in handcuffs of downtown Milwaukee. This obviously caught the attention of local patrol, and so they go over and talk to Mr. Edwards. And Edwards then describes how he had just been kidnapped, and he escaped from having been kidnapped. And fled. And so they find eventually the apartment of the man that had supposedly kidnapped him. His name is Jeffrey Dahmer. And it did not take very long of investigating before they found a lot of really horrific, gruesome stuff in that apartment. And pretty soon, Jeffrey Dahmer was charged with kidnapping, murdering, mutilating, and cannibalizing 17 young men. In the wake of this, he was sentenced with 15 life sentences, which was to be served at a Madison, Wisconsin prison. Well, 3 years into that, 2 years after the actual sentencing, on November 28, 1994, he was killed by another inmate. If there's anybody too far gone, if there's anybody that crossed the line, crossed the point of no return, it's Jeffrey Dahmer, right? Well, I want to read to you this article. This was written in the Christian Chronicle in 2010, years after the whole incident and years after his death, but it's reflecting back on his arrest and his subsequent murder. So, 2010, Christian Chronicle, this is written by the chief editor, Bobby Ross Jr., says, quote, "Few mourned the gruesome end for Jeffrey Dahmer, who strangled and dismembered 17 boys and men and cannibalized some of them. Most people wanted Jeffrey Dahmer to fry," Episcopal theologian Kendall Harmon said after Dahmer's November 28, 1994 slaying at a Madison, Wisconsin prison. Now that he's dead, they're celebrating. And they're absolutely sure he will burn in hell because that's what happens to people like him. Harmon, whose doctoral work at Oxford University covered 20 centuries of teachings about hell, told Scripps Howard News Service religion columnist Terry Mattingly. But did Dahmer go to hell? Or is there a chance that we'll see him, Brother Dahmer, that is, in heaven? How you answer may depend on whether you believe God can work miracles in hearts and minds, even behind bars, or if you brush aside prison ministry as quote-unquote jailhouse religion. When Dahmer died, I was a staff writer for the Oklahoman. I'll never forget talking that day with Kurt Booth, a member of the Crescent Church of Christ in Oklahoma, about his role in Dahmer's conversion. "I know Jeffrey was ready," Booth told me. "Today, all the angels in heaven are rejoicing because Jeffrey has come home." Booth said he had no doubt about the sincerity of Dahmer's conversion. "On the great resurrection day, I'm expecting to see him right along there with Abraham, David, Isaac, James, John, and all the saints that have lived right up to the modern day," Booth said. Booth usually ministered to inmates at prisons closer to home, but in April 1994, he caught a glimpse of Dahmer on television. Dahmer mentioned that he wished he could find a little peace, Booth said. The Oklahoma church member sensed what he considered the hurt in Dahmer's voice and eyes. Booth said he thought, "I know someone who can give you that peace. His name is Jesus Christ." Booth sent Dahmer a Bible correspondence course teaching the steps to salvation. Dahmer mailed the answers back and thanked Booth for the course. But I still have one problem, Dahmer wrote. This prison does not have a baptismal tank, and Mr. Burkham, the prison chaplain, is not sure if he can find someone to bring a tank in and baptize me. I've taken all the other steps. Booth contacted Roy Ratcliffe, minister of the Madison Church of Christ in Wisconsin. Ratcliffe set up weekly Bible lessons with Dahmer and baptized him on May 10, 1994. Ratcliffe later shared that Dahmer told him he had been fearful of the minister's visit. He dreaded that I might say, "No, you're too evil, you're too sinful. I can't baptize someone like you," Ratcliffe said. Booth said he contacted other preachers besides Ratcliffe, but they were kind of scared to go in. Upon hearing of Dahmer's conversion, David Hartman, a member of the Wilshire Church of Christ in Oklahoma City, wrote to congratulate him. Dahmer sent Hartman $5 worth of stamps asking to mail him 25 copies of a Bible correspondence course for distribution to other inmates. In one letter, Dahmer mentioned being attacked in July 1994, months before he was killed. "I don't know if you heard, but last Sunday I was attacked while in the chapel," Dahmer wrote. "Some guy tried to cut my throat with a razor, but didn't succeed. The razor broke and my neck was only slightly scratched. I believe that it was only the protective grace of our great Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, that saved me from serious injury or death." A lot of people, quite frequently, make all kinds of erroneous assumptions about themselves and about other people and where we all stand with God, just like they did and perhaps still do with people like Jeffrey Dahmer. And all of that is rooted in a misunderstanding of how the grace of God works, fundamentally, right? We connect it to the things that we do or did or are doing or plan to do rather than God's grace. I want to read this to you. This is from Luke chapter 15. This is a parable called the parable of the prodigal son. Prodigal, by the way, just means wasteful, and we'll certainly see that here. So in Luke 15, we're going to start in verse 11. We're going to cut it short to start out here. So starting in verse 11, and we'll read through verse 24. Jesus said, "There was a man who had 2 sons, and the younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of property that is coming to me.'" That's pretty much like telling your father, by the way, "Hey, I wish you were dead. Can you go ahead and give me my money already?" That's bad. Really, really bad. And he divided his property between them. Not many days later, the younger son gathered all he had and took a journey into a far country. And there he squandered his property in reckless living. And when he had spent everything, a severe famine arose in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and hired himself out to one of the citizens of that country, who sent him into his fields to feed pigs. And he was longing to be fed with the pods that the pigs ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said, "How many of my father's hired servants have more than enough bread, but I perish here with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and I will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me as one of your hired servants.' And he arose and came to his father. But while he was still a long way off, his father saw him and felt compassion, and ran and embraced him and kissed him. And the son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and before you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But their father said to his servants, 'Bring quickly the best robe, and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand, and shoes on his feet, and bring the fattened calf, and kill it, and let us eat and celebrate. For this my son was dead, and is alive again. He was lost, and is found.' And they began to celebrate." The prodigal son, the younger son, himself made an erroneous assumption here. He had committed this horrible act. He had disgraced his family. He had spurned his father in many ways. And yet, as he's planning this encounter, he knows, or at least he thinks he knows what to expect. My father's, he's going to be so mad at me. He's going to yell at me. This is not going to go well at all. I don't even know if he'll have me, I don't even know if I can stay in the house, even as a servant. I'm certainly not worthy to be called his son anymore. But then, as the father sees him, he's shocked by, he kisses him and embraces him and throws a feast and celebrates. He had no idea, no expectation that would happen, right? And so this parable, if nothing else, it is a remarkable analogy about God's grace and mercy that he shows towards sinners, right? That's what God does. You have a sinner who's penitent and comes before God with a humble heart, and God embraces and accepts that person back with joy. The angels in heaven rejoice. Right? Some Christians misunderstand the real point of this parable, though. Some people will say, all right, this is how we see the Father accepting back his Son. He committed this great evil against him, this great sin against him, and yet when he comes back, he's very kind to him. And so, well, I guess we should be kind to the people who have sinned against us. Now, that's true, but that's not the point, right? In some way, you might look at this and you would go, what sane father even would react this way? I mean, if you were in the Father's shoes, would you really do that? Would you celebrate? I mean, it might be worth, maybe you'd have some mixed emotions, but would you just celebrate and embrace? Would that be your first instinct? 2 Samuel 13 and 14. We're not going to read this whole story, but I want to look at a few pieces that are a part of it. And I'll set this up for you here. 2 Samuel 13, we have two of David's offspring, Amnon and Tamar. And I'll give you the real quick version of the story. Amnon and Tamar are half-siblings, but Amnon falls in love with Tamar, or is infatuated with her, really. And he tries to figure out a way to make that work, and Tamar wants nothing to do with it, and so Amnon forces himself upon her and sexually assaults her. So that's horrible, right? But then Absalom, another one of David's sons, and their sibling, right? Absalom finds out about this, finds out what Amnon did to Tamar, and Absalom is furious. And so Absalom devises this plot to murder Amnon. And so that's what he does. He murders Amnon, and then he runs away. And he runs away for 3 years. He's gone. Now, during that 3-year period, David finds out about this, and I can't imagine the emotional turmoil that would be involved with this. Finding out what happened to Tamar, finding out that your own son did it, finding out that one of your sons, in an attempt to execute justice, killed your other son. Like, I can't wrap my head around what that would be like. And so he has these conflicting emotions, and he actually wants to talk to Absalom about this, but it's like he can't bring himself to. That's why in 2 Samuel 13:39, how does it describe this here? The spirit of the king longed to go out to Absalom because he was comforted about Amnon since he was dead. But he doesn't. He doesn't do anything, right? Well, Joab, David's second-hand guy, cooks up this scheme, right, to get David to really think about this. And the short of it, again, is that David ends up very reluctantly asking Absalom to come back to Jerusalem. If nothing else, because the line of succession would be in question if Absalom didn't return, and David didn't want that. So David has Absalom return back to Jerusalem. And he gets back there, but he intentionally distances himself from Absalom, even still. So in chapter 14, verse 24, he says, "Let him dwell apart in his own house. He is not to come into my presence." So Absalom lived apart in his own house and did not come into the king's presence. Remember, it had already been 3 years. Now it was an additional 2 years in Jerusalem without contact. Verse 28, so Absalom lived 2 full years in Jerusalem without coming into the king's presence. Now Absalom is angry about this, and he goes to the field of Joab, the second-hand guy, and he sets his field on fire just to get his attention. And Joab comes to him and says, "What do you want? Why are you doing this?" "I need to talk to the king." And so they finally set something up. And in chapter 14, verse 33, finally, after 5 years, look at this deep interaction. Then Joab went to the king and told him, and he summoned Absalom. So he came to the king and bowed himself on his face to the ground before the king, and the king kissed Absalom. That is all we are told. And then, kind of unsurprisingly, Absalom actually organizes a coup to overthrow the throne of David, his father. Now, was David, who, by the way, when you think about the way that Judaism and Christianity, the way that we think about David, David is upheld as this pinnacle of Jewish morality. Sure, he messed up, but in spite of the errors that he made, he often took the corrective action that was necessary. So David is held up as this pinnacle of morality. Was he ever condemned for responding like this to the whole situation? Not really. Back in chapter 14, verse 14, he's told by this woman that Joab had hired, hey, you should probably let your son come back to Jerusalem. But that's pretty much it. David's response is not rebuked at any point. Why? Because it's normal. Right? David's response is human. If you were in David's shoes, wouldn't you probably do something akin to this? I'll tell you what's not normal. Here's what's not human. And this is, by the way, the opening preceding the parable of the prodigal son. Here's what's not normal. Leaving 99 sheep behind to track down the one that got away, leaving the 99 sheep without a shepherd there. And then going to track down the one and carrying the one back to the 99. That's not normal. I'll tell you what else isn't normal. Throwing a very expensive party after you had lost a $5 bill or some equivalent close to that. You had lost a $5 bill, you couldn't find it, so you throw your house upside down to find it. You finally find it, and then you throw a very, very expensive party with your neighbors and friends to celebrate. No sane person does that. And that's the point. The point of these three, what are called the lost parables, the lost sheep, the lost coin, the lost son, or as I like to call it, the two lost sons. Both of them were lost for different reasons, as we'll see here in a minute. God is not like us. God's mercy and God's capacity for mercy is so much greater than we will ever understand. His love for humanity is so much greater than most of us would even consider sensible. And heaven rejoices when one sinner returns, even if nobody else around that sinner does. And by the way, they often do not. That's demonstrated at the close of this parable. So back to Luke chapter 15 now. Let's start in verse 25 this time. Luke 15, verse 25 through 32. Now his older son was in the field, and as he came and drew near the house, he heard music and dancing. And he called one of the servants and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, your brother has come, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he has received him back safe and sound. But he was angry and refused to go in. His father came out and entreated him. But he answered his father, look, these many years I have served you. I have never disobeyed your command, yet you never gave me a young goat that I might celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came, notice how dissociative that is. Not my brother, but this son of yours came, who has devoured your property with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him. And he said to him, son, you are always with me, and all that is mine is yours. It was fitting to celebrate and be glad. For this your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. There's a parable that's very similar to this in Matthew chapter 20, verses 1 through 16, where there are all of these workers that are brought out throughout the day. They're day laborers. And at the beginning of the day, he meets with the ones that come first, sunrise, and he says, I'll pay you 1 denarius if you come and work the field for the day. And they agree, and they come out and start working. Well, all throughout the day, he's bringing more and more workers to work the field up until the very last few minutes. And right up to the end, there are these people coming in, and it's time for everybody to pack up and go home. And the people who came last were paid first, and they were paid 1 denarius. And so the people who came at sunrise thought, oh, wow, they got paid 1 denarius. I wonder how much we're going to get. They get to the front, and what are they paid? 1 denarius. Seems a little unjust, doesn't it? I heard one guy talking about this parable, and he was talking about deathbed confessions. And he said, deathbed confessions, they feel very unjust in a sense. Because you can dedicate your whole life to Christ. You can carry that cross your entire life. You can be prepared for the return of Christ and work hard for it. And then this guy lives however he wants his entire life. But then at the very end, in the last 5 minutes, he says he believes in Jesus. And how is that fair? It's kind of like the worker who comes in early and is mad at what the latecomers are being paid. It's kind of like the older brother who's angry that the father is celebrating the return of his brother. It's kind of like those people who were looking at people like Dahmer and going, well, that's not fair. Don't you know all he did? At the beginning of the chapter in Luke 15, verses 1 and 2, this is important. Look at the setup. So Luke 15, verses 1 and 2, now the tax collectors and sinners were all drawing near to him, and the Pharisees and the scribes grumbled, saying, this man receives sinners and eats with them. See, the Pharisees made an assumption about these prodigal sinners and tax collectors. They were coming to the feet of Jesus, and they were willing to listen, presumably. And here the Pharisees are angry about that. The Pharisees are the older brother. And they made an assumption about those people. They made an assumption. You hear it even in the language, these sinners and tax collectors. Doesn't he know who these people are? Do you think people in the church ever do that? You know who those people are? Oh, well, we don't want anything to do with them. Right? They made an incorrect assumption that these people had already crossed the line of God's mercy and somehow were not allowed back. Right? So the whole parable contrasts the response of the father to the response of the brother. The response of Jesus to the sinners and tax collectors, and he's welcoming them, to that of the Pharisees who want nothing to do with them. Right? And this whole parable highlights a very important, broader idea. This is really critical. Sometimes there is going to be an incongruity between how God sees you and what other people think about you. Did you hear that? There is sometimes an incongruity between how God sees you and what other people think about you, about your spiritual health, about your eternal destiny, all of it. And people have all kinds of opinions about everything, and certainly people have opinions about us sometimes, right? But those opinions don't change reality, and they don't change or affect how God sees us. All you have to do is you have to make sure that you are right with Jesus, and you don't have to worry about what anybody else thinks, right? Because according to Acts chapter 17, verse 31, who at the very end is going to be the judge of all things and all peoples? Jesus Christ, whom he has appointed and made known by raising him from the dead. In 1 Samuel chapter 16, verses 6 and 7, Samuel is looking for the next king of Israel after Saul was rejected by God. And he goes into the house of Jesse, and he sees the oldest brother, a young man named Eliab, and he says, oh, surely this is the one. And God says something really important to Samuel. He says, do not look at this man or on the height of his stature. I have not chosen him. For God does not see people as man sees people. Man looks on the outward appearance, but God looks upon the heart. No matter what you have done, no matter how badly you have messed up, if you return to God with a sincere heart, God will embrace you, and the angels in heaven will rejoice. Whatever else you've been told by other people that contradicts that, don't believe it. From Psalm 130, verse 3. Verses 3 and 4. If you, O Lord, should mark iniquities, O Lord, who could stand? But with you there is forgiveness, that you may be feared. And then over in Micah chapter 7. Micah is one of these hidden away in the minor prophets. And it takes me even a long time sometimes to find it. Here we go, Micah chapter 7, verses 18 and 19. Yeah, 18 and 19. Who is a God like you, pardoning iniquity and passing over transgression for the remnant of his inheritance? He does not retain his anger forever, because he delights in steadfast love. He will again have compassion on us. He will tread our iniquities underfoot. You will cast all our sins into the depths of the sea. Do you want your sins and your guilt cast into the depths of the sea? Well, God is waiting for you with open arms to do just that. So pray about that. Be baptized if you haven't been. Come worship with us and talk to us about that as we strive to do that together. I want to share with you some of the resources that we have for you that hopefully will help you in your journey and your faith walk. First, we have our Bible correspondence course. This is published by the World Bible School. You can participate in this either online or by mail. You can go to the worldbibleschool.org for more information. If you do not have a Bible, we would love for you to have one. Just let us know that you would like one. You can reach us by mail at P.O. Box 372. That's in Marquette, zip code 49855. You can also find a lot of this information on letthebiblespeak.net. You can also listen to all of our episodes in audio format by searching Let the Bible Speak UP. You do have to put the UP on the end of that to get the correct one. Let the Bible Speak UP on Spotify, Audible, iHeartRadio, and on Podbean. And you can listen to our episodes in audio format. If you have not yet, and we would love to have you and see you there, come worship with us at the Marquette Church of Christ. That's going to be at 1104 West Fair Avenue. That's just across from the high school, the Marquette Senior High School on Fair. Down the road from the medical center, if you know where that's at. Or the Escanaba Church of Christ, if you're close to that, 5079 18th Road. Again, both of our worship services start at 11. I wanted to share with you real quick that this is going to be my last episode for most of the year here. Brian Poe from the Escanaba Church, he's going to be coming on through November and December, and he's going to be covering those episodes during that span, and I plan to be back, Lord willing, at the beginning of the year in 2026. It feels wild even just saying that number because it seems like 2025 just started. Isn't that something? Time marches on, doesn't it? But thank you so much for being here, and thank you for bearing with me over these last few months. Glad to see you. May God bless you and have a great week.